Right. No, I do think that it fits, Greg, with what you call a naturalistic, you could say coherent naturalistic ontology. And it fits interesting because one of the things that I also learned from Umberto Maturana in his workshop, he used to show this diagram, that he would talk about the two basic epistemologies or the two basic ontologies that we humans can navigate to construct our worlds. So he would say, he would start with the human, the Homo sapiens, and he would say these humans exist in emotions and language. But, and depending on the narrative or the explanations that you could say, adopt, because as linguistic animals, we adopt narratives without questioning some of them. We stories, we're storytelling animal, as Harari likes to say, we are the storytelling animal in his book Homo Deus. And we create the stories, and then we forgot that we created the story, and then the stories shape us.
That's right.
So we are in this circular linguistic system, and Maturana explains that very well in this model. And then he goes to the conclusion, depending on the story, the explanation that you either accept or reject or listen to or live by, you move into two potential ontological paths, let's call it that. So one ontological path is what he calls the transcendental, where the world is out there, and you could say there are entities and realities, but everything is outside of the human world. And you can go down the list. And then there's the constitutive, where he prefers to call the constitutive ontology, where the human being as a linguistic animal goes back to the term of bringing forth social realities. And specifically with language and action, we bring forth, for example, a relationship like you and I are doing right now.
Exactly.
We bring in forth a social reality, a relationship. We bring forth societies. We bring forth cultures. So it's naturalistic because it depends on the human being a linguistic, biological animal. And we are bringing forth our civilization. And then he talks about a feedback loop back. These worlds that we constitute, that we generate, come back and shape us. So now you got this flow. So the quality of the conversations shapes the quality of the relationships, which shapes the quality of the world that we bring forth, which comes back. And so it's like, wow. So that to me is a naturalistic, coherent ontology. And
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that. So for me, and the way I would do it is sort of like, I sort of frame sometimes UTOK in terms of the tree, the garden, and the coin. So the tree is like the tree of knowledge. That's like, okay, what did science teach us about what is naturalistically? So that's Big Bang, and then evolution happened, and then over the last, and that's what's been, and we can map that. And we can use science to create some sort of relatively transcendent map about what is independent of humans. We can talk about how dependent it is, but that is a frame of what is. The garden fundamentally is this constitutive narrative that weaves our social world together, and it needs to be pointed toward wisdom. So, the tree is like, well, accuracy, but the fundamental point of the garden is the cultivation of wisdom, because the wisdom feeds back on itself. It is co-constitutive. The ontology it generates influences the ontic reality it becomes in a feedback loop.
Yes.
And so, I love that he makes that distinction.
No, it's great. And the way you describe it, it's beautiful, Greg. And I would say this is a very challenging part of Maturana's work for a lot of people, because a lot of people who come to study or who came to study with him, they are still in that transcendental mode for for whatever.
If you get trained as a scientist, or a particular kind of engineer or analytic person, or
a very, you could say, traditional religious tradition.
Well, there's that too, right? That's a whole other frame of reference to getting transcendent realist claims.
So you could say the constitutive path is challenging. It's what Keegan would say self-altering.
Yep.
In a sense, because then you go, wow, you mean the civilization, the society, the culture that we have is, we created it? Yeah, that's a big responsibility.
That's right.
You cannot blame other beings for this thing. So, you could say, that's like really getting the license to drive the 747.
Well, right. This is why I love your system so much, because essentially it's so congruent with what the UTOK tries to do. I mean, the whole point of the coin is like, well, this is our lives. So the coin this side of the coin symbolizes our lives. And so this is you as Manuel, me as Gregg, and anybody that's listening inside their own epistemological portal. And then you have your particular life world, life quest, And let's face it, each of us, I sometimes use the analogy, each of us are fleas on a Titanic. We're bouncing up. Right. I mean, what the hell can we do? But the collection of fleas might be able to turn the Titanic, right? And the collection of thieves may be able to land the ship in a particular type of way. And but for that to happen at some level, our individual coins have got to connect into a web of narrative that then creates a collective intelligence system that then legitimizes investment in a particular way, and then realizes, to use John Vervaeke's term, creates a collective recursive relevance realization system that actually drives the system into the future possible space that it can envision. And that is part of this evolutionary leadership task that I see you as really, having an eye on for obviously a very long time, and obviously catching people's visions, whether it's Fuller or Salk or Maturana, and being able to see, like so many visionaries, it's like, listen, this has been a wonderful ride up to a point, but there's actually has to be a transition to a fundamentally new state of being. And then your vision of like, well, wait a minute, how do we lead people to lead this thing? How do we become conscious of that? Right.
Right.
It's amazing. Yeah. It's